I am reading today from the book from Nikki Eltz, who interviewed Maria Simma, who for 4 decades had souls from purgatory visit her. Today, we are reading what the poor souls told Maria Simma about suffering and reparation. Maria, if we were to ask of Jesus that we do our purgatory here on earth, does he answer this request? Well, one should not say always, but often, yes, it does happen. I know of a case where a priest and a woman were in the same hospital together. Both were very ill, but could still get up and spend time together. They often went outside together and got to know each other quite well. The woman, who was not old, told the priest that she had asked exactly that of Jesus, that she could suffer enough while still here to go to heaven straight away. To this, the priest said, "Ooh, I would not dare ask that. It's just too bit challenging." "No," said the woman. "If I ask that of my Jesus, I trust him that he will grant me this wish." A religious sister there knew both of them and knew that the woman had often spoken those words. So it happened that the young woman died first, and then soon thereafter, the priest did too. A short time later, the priest appeared to the sister and told her that, had he been as trusting and devout as the woman, he too would have gone straight to heaven without any time in purgatory. Maria, do entire towns or even nations get punished, or as you prefer to put it, are dealt reparation by God for the sins in their past? Yes, they do. So if everyone in the West today confessed their own sins and quickly went about praying and doing extra reparation with good deeds for the relatively immediate ancestry, the reparation you say God is soon sending to us would be drastically diminished. Do I understand this correctly? Yes, this is true, and it's that simple. Pray and confess, then pray too for your deceased family, and do some extra good deeds for them. Then God will lessen the reparation that he now has planned and which will come without people's advanced knowledge. When the souls of priests come to you, Maria, what happens when they, of course, do not have families who can step in for them after they die? They have me. They have good friends, and I am one of them. Even the ones you didn't know personally? Oh, of course. I will do for them whatever it is they need. Also take on suffering? Mm-hmm. Are you willing to speak about this? She says, Jesus never gives us more than we can take. A long time ago now, a priest came and said that if I take on 3 hours of suffering, that it was going to save him 20 years in purgatory. I said yes, because my priest told me I should take all that is requested of me, and I always have. Soon I was in a pain that consumed every inch of my body so entirely that I was immobile and unable to realize my whereabouts. But a joy stayed in my heart because it remained very clear to me what this would bring for the priest. Still, after a while, I thought this had to be 3 days rather than 3 hours. Then, as suddenly as it came, it also left. And I realized that I had stayed, of course, where I had been all along. I looked at my watch and it had been 3 hours, and that to the very minute. At other times, it's a local pain. Once, for instance, my right arm hurt for a long time, and no matter what I did or how I held it, it remained the same. This turned out to be for a soul who had mishandled someone's will, and of course, that would entail the arm and hand with which he wrote and worked. When we take on sufferings with God's love for us, everything becomes possible, and then the very best of fruits come from them. Suffering, in other words, the cross without love is too heavy, but love without a cross just doesn't exist. Do they tell you then how long it will last? No, other than that one time. That's the worst part of it, my not knowing how long it will last. But that time, it was 3 hours. Do you accept such sufferings on a regular basis or more during certain times than others? I always accept what is brought to me, but during Lent, for instance, they make their presence known to me very strongly through sufferings that I take on for them. At other times, it happens whenever they request it. Maria, do you still take on these sufferings these days as often as in the earlier years? No, it's less now than before because lately I've gone on lecture tours much more often than I did in the early years. And my doing that also helps the souls a lot. When you were younger, did you ever think that you were going to go around the cities of Central Europe giving lectures to large halls full of people? Never. I would have laughed loudly and been scared inside and only thinking about it. But God now gives me the strength and courage to do so, and I get to see many good fruits coming from it. And for this, I'm so very grateful to Him. Have you also taken on great fears as those suffered by Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane? No, until now, that has not happened. The time ratio, 3 hours for 20 years, as you mentioned before, is it always the same or sometimes different? Well, it's entirely different in every case. That's because there are infinitely different levels of purgatory. A poor soul told me that 10 years of a light purgatory is far, far easier to take than 2 days of the deepest. Moreover, we must not think that a soul must rise slowly through all the levels to finally walk out on the top. They can go from the deepest straight up to heaven. Do you think that the sufferings you take on voluntarily are similar to the sufferings in purgatory? Yes, they seem so to me. My body, once the sufferings have left, carries no scars or any other lasting effects from them. So that means it is entirely in the soul. And that's what makes me think they are very similar. Maria, if we see someone with great suffering, can we step in and offer it to God for them? Yes, but it does not count as much as when the person himself does it. And if this one's own suffering and one does well for a time, but then loses patience, and again later offers it up in hindsight, so to say, does this then have value? Again, yes, but not as much as doing it all the way through until it's gone. Maria, if a person has to offer up all the future sufferings, all of his future sufferings to God, knowing that he might weaken when they come about, does this have the same value as doing it while it's happening? Oh, yes, it would. God knows our sincerity when we offer it to Him. So if someone suffers and does not offer to God, the value of the suffering is lost? In regard to that soul reaching heaven more quickly, yes. But still, that suffering occurred because most often something happened in the past, and that, of course, is then repaired. With or without our help, God lets it happen. He's purely loving and knows perfectly what is best for us. What else can you say about suffering? Second only to life itself and the time in which to do good while we are here, suffering is the biggest gift from God there is. While suffering here, we still receive the grace to do good deeds. But once we're in purgatory, that is over forever. Suffering always heals something, and we must trust in God that it is always for our good and for His glory. There's one enormous grace that comes with suffering that I'd like to emphasize. It is in suffering that people find each other and find each other's hearts. In suffering, the other person becomes the important one, and without suffering, most people tend to think only of themselves first. The West has this problem to a great degree, and in the reparation that God will soon bring upon the West, people will again find each other in their suffering. That will be good and will bring the best out of people who are now only thinking about their next and bigger house or car. This too is a cleansing process. So very often what is at first considered a disaster ends up an enormous grace and a gift from God. Maria, when the suffering comes from Satan, should we behave any differently than when it comes from God? All suffering comes from God insofar as He permits us also to suffer at the hands of Satan. Yet if we recognize it as coming from Satan, it is our duty to bring the person to an exorcist. Whereas if the suffering comes from God directly, the exorcist will be able to do nothing. Some people have said, I hope God does not love me too much. I know a mother telling her son who is studying for the priesthood, tell God He can do anything He wants with you. To this he answered, oh no, then He'll ask too much of me. This is not true. Rest assured that God never asks of us more than we can take. Maria, knowing that very many types of people exist and that what comes out of our psyches can never be underestimated, some might now decide to ask God for extra sufferings. For those so inclined, would you suggest such a prayer? In general, no, not at all. People who live in the world and who have others to be responsible for should not do this, for their sufferings will come about one way or another. Prayers for extra suffering should be left to those who lead a cloistered life, to those who are only responsible for themselves and who always have help around them. They may wish to do this, but others should not. In my case, I never asked for it either, but I have let it happen to me for the souls in purgatory. And I chose not to have a family so that I could give my whole life to them. Here, too, my case is different from that of most other people. Maria, whether from the living or for the souls, is there any one subject or one sin for which you have had to suffer the most? And if there is, what is that one subject or sin? From both among the living and the souls, that subject would certainly be communion in the hand. Have you ever considered simply mentioning it less often? No. It is my God-given duty to tell people about purgatory, and it is also my duty to include truthfully everything that the poor souls have told me about the condition of the church. How could I possibly leave things out only in order to make my life more comfortable when the condition of the church, as the souls have so often told me, is the worst ever since the beginning? Then I would certainly not be a true friend of the souls. Recently, it happened that I was invited by a parish to speak, and when the priest called me, he said he wanted only one subject not to be discussed. Upon my asking him what that was, he answered, hand communion. When I then asked the souls what I should do, they told me, without all the truth, there will be no lecture. And so I had to say the same thing to the priest. In the same way, I will not authorize any book or article about me if those who publish it chose to neglect the subject of communion in the hand. Maria, by the appearance here in your den and by the times that your telephone has rung, it seems as though you must get a lot of mail and many, many telephone calls. Have you ever counted in any way how much mail you get or how many phone calls come into you each day? No, but the other day the postmaster teased me because I received 73 letters on that one day. And my local priest, Father Bischoff, told me recently that the telephone company had told him that I get more calls than the crisis number in Feldkirch. Other than the postmaster, who, Maria, is your very best friend here on earth. uh, who is your best friend? Oh, that is, of course, my spiritual director. And who's your second best friend here on earth? Anybody who is honest and says things the way they are. Maria, as much as it saddens me, I have run out of questions to ask you. Thanks be to God, and heartfelt thanks to you, as well as having permitted me to pester you with so much during these 2 days. But before I leave, could you just tell me one more incident where the souls helped someone and did something unusual to put emphasis on their great need? Oh, you haven't pestered me. It was a joy to hear so many thoughtful questions. I too thank God and thank you for them. And as for your request, let me think for a minute. Holy Spirit, please enlighten me now. Oh, here we are. Just recently, 2 sisters came to me from a nearby town to ask what their deceased father needed to go to heaven. As always, I was glad to take his name along with the years of his birth and death. Then one of the sisters said in a stern voice that if the answer I received for them had anything at all to do with money, they would not participate. I told them that this would be their business and not mine, but if they wanted an answer, I would of course be happy to get one for them. Then they went home. It was 2 or so weeks later that I received an answer for this name from another soul. I let the sisters know so that they would come here to pick it up. They came, and I handed them the answer that was that their father needed 7 holy masses celebrated to be delivered into heaven. Then, with it in hand, they left without saying anything other than a courteous thank you. Some time went by, and another woman from their town came to me on an entirely different business, but it happened that she was a neighbor of those 2 same sisters. After we had discussed whatever it was that she needed, I simply asked her how those 2 sisters were doing. To this she answered, "Oh, they are doing very well now. I was with them when they discussed your letter in which you asked them why they were permitting their good father to suffer longer. They were shocked by what they read. How on earth was it possible that you knew that they had yet to arrange for their father's masses? And then they dashed over to their church to do so. To this I said nothing, and the woman went on her way. Do you see, Nikki? I never wrote them a letter. My gosh, how wonderful. Yes, the souls are wonderful, and I beg people to start praying for them. I promise you it will not take long for souls to jump in and help their friends in ways that will amaze them every time. Is there anything in conclusion, Maria, which you would like to say to the world if you were given the chance to do so? Only, as I have already mentioned earlier, the poor souls have told me that the church is in the worst condition that it has ever been before in its history. But they have also told me that it will become much better and that we can look forward to peaceful times. Before that, however, a great storm will come. And it is that about which Our Lady does not want us to worry, think, or gossip. God always takes care of his children. This great storm will include the prophecies of La Salette, which said that something that we have never seen before is coming upon us, and those of Fatima, as it will also include the warning of Garabandal and the secrets held by the children of Medjugorje. Finally, I pass on to you that which our Blessed Mother and the Mother of Jesus advises us about this. Just pray and fast for peace on earth and bring God's immeasurable love and forgiveness to all of our brothers and sisters everywhere. It seems to me that you must have a huge number of people asking you to pray for them, Maria. And if this is truth, what do you do for them all? You cannot pray a full rosary or attend a holy mass for each one of them. So is there perhaps a particular prayer that you'll offer for them? Yes, there is. The souls suggested that I pray the following for them. Glory, praise, gratitude, and adoration be to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be. Amen. And again, Maria, what was it exactly that you yourself have learned throughout these many decades of truly extraordinary experiences? I have learned to love God with all my might. That is the end of the interview that Nikki had with Maria. Maria died on March 19th, 2004, and then the author, Nikki Eltz, died on August 5th of 2012. In my future videos, I will have words written by the poor souls, by Maria, as conveyed by the poor souls, as well as very powerful prayers and letters from her bishop. And I've read them. What I'm going to read is not boring. It's still very intriguing. So stay tuned. I hope all of this has helped you pray so much harder for the poor souls in purgatory. Welcome suffering in ways you've never welcomed it before, because a paper cut here is worth so much more than great suffering there. The greater your suffering here, faster you can get yourself out of there. I'm Dr. Christine Bacon. Thanks for watching this informational Bacon Bit. And as always, remember to live your life sunny side up.